What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and today I have a bit of an odd Battlefield 1 topic for you: melee weapons. I never planned on creating a melee weapon guide video, since even though there are a total of 26 melee weapons in the game as of the In the Name of the Tsar expansion pack, there are really only 3 different kinds of melee weapons: quick stabby ones, medium wacky ones, and slow slashy ones. But I've had several requests to cover this topic, and good news everyone, I believe I have uncovered some relatively interesting information that many will probably not know about yet, so let's get this video started. Now, since so many of these weapons are essentially identical, I won't be structuring this video around the least used one, but it might nevertheless be interesting to explore some of the usage stats. As always, I grabbed the latest stats from battlefieldtracker.com, and since their melee weapon chart also includes things like the cavalry saber, the bayonet charge, and the trench raider club, the stats you see here have been adjusted to only show the weapons available to the 4 standard infantry classes. We have to be a little bit careful when interpreting this information, since not all of these weapons are available to all players. Some are locked behind DLC, some are pre-order options, and the barbed wire bat is only available as a special gift from the developers. With this in mind, it still surprises me to see that the most used weapon of all, in terms of its usage timeshare, is the default choice, the combat knife. The only explanation I have for this is that there are quite a considerable number of new players in the game right now that have not yet switched away from this weapon. What is less surprising is that the special melee weapons that can only be unlocked via puzzle pieces have a relatively high usage share. Despite being rarer, once a player manages to unlock one of these special weapons, I can imagine that it will see quite a considerable amount of use. But the really interesting insights come to light once we add up the usage share for each of the 3 different weapon classes. The 12 knives together are used 30.6% of the time, while the 7 clubs are used 23.3% of the time, and the 7 chopping weapons are used 46.1% of the time. That means that each knife on average is used 2.5% of the time, each club 3.3% of the time, and each chopping weapon 6.6% of the time. The big, slow, hacky weapons are thereby twice as popular as the clubs and almost 3 times as popular as the knives, despite the ridiculous usage share of the combat knife. We'll come back to these stats later when we calculate how efficient the 3 different types of weapons are, but before then, let's take a quick look at how they work. There are 2 different weapon stat menus in the game, one in the weapon selection menu and another one in the menu that gives you your personal usage stats. Both of these menus have 2 stats associated with each melee weapon: damage and another one that is once called speed and once called stability, because that's not confusing at all. I'm pretty sure that the 2 menus still refer to the same stats, since even though the weapon selection menu does not give us specific numbers, it's quite easy to see that we are looking at 40-90, 60-60, and 80-40, just like in the stats menu. But what does this stability/speed stat mean? And actually, I'll tell you what, why don't we take a step back and cover the easy part first. Damage. Simple, right? Knives do 40 damage, clubs 60, and edged long weapons do 80. Except that's not true at all. After digging into the code of the game, link in the description below if you fancy a poke around for yourself, I discovered that knives actually do 35 points of damage, clubs 45, and edged weapons 55. And to make sure that these numbers are correct, I tested the different weapons in-game, and the long-edged weapons do in fact cause 55 points of damage, the clubs do 45, and knives do 34, for a reason that I neither understand nor care about at this stage. 34 it is, whatever, it's close enough. Digging around in the code dump, I also found the range of each weapon, and for each class it is always 2.3 meters. Whether you're wildly swinging about with a cavalry saber or poking your enemies with a titchy survival knife, your reach will always be the same, and as unrealistic as that is, I can understand the choice from a balancing and consistency perspective. And now over to the stability/speed stat. There are 2 important stats in the code for each of the melee weapons that seem to be related to this, and my guess is that the in-game stat is a calculated number that is supposed to represent both of the actual mechanics. In the game, knives are 90, clubs are 60, and edged weapons 40, except for the saber, which is listed as faster/more stable at 50. In the code, on the one hand, we have something called the invalid melee attack zone, which is expressed in degrees, and here knives have the smallest with 225 degrees, clubs have 240 degrees, and edged weapons have 270 degrees. This conversely gives us what I think stability is supposed to mean, the angle of attack from behind at which you can still get a one-hit melee kill. With knives, this is 360 degrees minus the exclusion zone of 225 equals 135 degrees. For clubs, it's 120 degrees, and edged weapons have the narrowest one-shot cone of 90 degrees behind the enemy. And that only leaves speed, which should correspond to the rate of fire in the game's code and the time it takes to swing each weapon modeled as spawn delay. The rate of fire is 138 per minute for knives, 100 per minute for clubs, and 60 per minute for edged weapons. The time to swing is 100, 150, and 200 milliseconds. But wait a second, I didn't mention any special stats for the saber. According to the in-game stats, it's supposed to have better speed and/or stability. Well, I double-checked each of the stats in the code, and for all of the stats I've covered so far, this saber has no advantage over the other edged weapons. I also made sure to check the damage stats for both the cavalry version and the infantry version in-game, and they both do 55 points of damage. Maybe my interpretation of what speed or stability is meant to be is wrong, or maybe the stat for the saber is just wrong, just like each and every one of the damage stats is. I'll leave it up to you to decide which explanation is more likely.
As the war drags on throughout Europe, attrition is wearing down forces on both sides, and rumors are spreading about a decline of the number of troops on the battlefield. But a new ray of hope shines brightly on the horizon. The Russians have finally sent an early expeditionary force to attack a vital mountain pass on the eastern edge of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As of now, these troops have been reliant on weapons from our existing supplies, but it has been confirmed by sources close to the Tsar's regime that a full invasion by Russian troops armed with their own weapons is merely days away. This invasion is expected to open up a whole host of new battlefields, and the flood of new weapons, machinery, and equipment is also expected to reach existing combat zones in Central Europe and the Middle East. The reinvigorated fighting brought on by this significant expansion to the war will require more men, and still more men, if we are to win the battles before us. General Rognine's company has steadily grown to where he now commands 3-4 platoons of 100 men each, and in response to the upcoming battles on the Eastern Front, a new elite platoon named Rogues Reapers has been formed and is open to new applicants. All platoon engagements will be coordinated via Rognine's Discord group, so make sure you also join that to ensure you are able to receive your marching orders in a timely fashion. Your country needs you now more than ever. If you are of fighting age and able to join the EU sector of the battlefield on a personal computer, do not delay. Search for Rogues Reapers in the platoon menu today and join one of the finest groups of fighting men and women this war will see.
Okay, now that we have the rate of fire, strike delay, and actual damage for each of the weapons, we can finally start looking into which type is the best by calculating the theoretical time to kill. For knives, the rate of fire of 138 per minute means 2.3 per second, and if we add the strike delay onto that, it means that each swing takes 535 milliseconds. If we perform the same calculations for the other melee classes, we get 750 milliseconds for the clubs and 1.2 seconds for edged weapons. And if we combine this with the number of hits required per kill, this gives us a theoretical time to kill of 1.07 seconds, 1.5 seconds, and 1.2 seconds. And of course, I've learned my lesson when it comes to trusting the stats in games, so in addition to calculating these figures, I double-checked them by testing them in-game, and I am thrilled to report that they are just about bang on. Conclusion: when attacking a full health opponent, the knives kill the fastest, then the edged weapons, and in last place we have the clubs. But take these stats with a grain of salt. Due to the nature of the ridiculous movement speed and the fact that you can glitch straight through your enemies, close quarters knife fights are a really messy affair in Battlefield 1. The more strikes you need to land to get your kill, the greater the chance of missing or getting stabbed in the back from an enemy who was right in front of you just now, but then suddenly was behind you because GG dice. This, in my opinion, gives the 2-strike edged weapons a bit of an advantage over the other two classes which require 3 strikes. And beyond this, 1 to 1.5 seconds for a kill is really slow compared to other weapons. If you think back to my sidearm videos, you'll remember that the time to kill stats were somewhere between 200 and 600 milliseconds, less than half the time of a fast melee kill. So the best way to use your melee weapon is not to start stabbing a full health opponent anyway, there's just no point. The best way to win a close quarters engagement is to only use your melee weapon after landing a couple of shots on target first. Of course, if you're playing as assault, medic or even support, your best close quarters weapon is still your main gun. The only time you would really be using a melee weapon is when you're playing as a class whose primary weapon is poor at close range, i.e. the scouts, cavalry or maybe pilots and tankers. So if we assume that you first put 2 semi-auto pistol rounds or 1 revolver shot on target, then the edged weapons become a guaranteed one-hit kill, taking an additional 200 milliseconds after you've fired your shots. With knives, you will almost always still need 2 stabs, which would take 535 milliseconds unless you're using the 1911, in which case even knives can go for an instant takedown. The riskiest melee weapons in this scenario are the clubs. If you use a revolver or one of the small caliber semi-autos, you will still need 2 swings of your club, leaving you with an unchanged time to kill of 750 milliseconds after the shots. Only the large caliber semi-autos doing at least 28 points of damage will allow for a one-hit kill after landing the 2 shots. What does all of this mean? Well, with the slowest time to kill against full health opponents and a limited range of sidearms that allow for a quick finish, the clubs are my least favorite melee weapon. The knives are quick to use and have a great backstab angle, but since they will usually still need 2 strikes when used in combination with a sidearm, they make second place for me. Top of the list, and by far my favorite type of melee weapon, are the larger edged weapons. They are relatively slow to kill if you need 2 swings, and their smaller backstab angle requires more precision, but combined with tactical sidearm use, they become very reliable, and if we think back to the usage time shares, we remember that the edged weapons were the most popular, so it seems that most of the Battlefield 1 community agrees. And with that, there are only 2 aspects left to cover: the special abilities and the efficiency ratios. The special abilities are pretty straightforward. Break barbed wire, break wood, and break light vehicles, and it is these abilities that are the only differentiating factors for weapons in the same class. Other than that, we're really just talking reskins. Let's start off with the least useful of the 3, breaking wood. The number of times that I've been in a situation in the game where I thought, man, I really wish I could break through this wood here with my melee weapon, is approximately 0. Sure, sometimes as a medic you're trying to revive a guy who has somehow become stuck underneath some crates, but if that occurs and a guy miraculously hasn't skipped yet, a grenade or your primary weapon can help you clear the obstacles quicker and more efficiently than sitting there smashing them up with a club. Slightly less useless is the ability to damage light vehicles and emplaced guns. And I do really mean ever so slightly here, because the number of times that I've attacked a light vehicle with my club is also fairly precisely 0. The only use I see for this ability is to deny the enemy the use of an AA gun or field gun near their home spawn by smashing it up. But once again, you can say it with me here, the number of times I have done this in the game is, yes, 0. No, the only ability that I use from time to time is breaking wire. It's not an essential thing to have, but on occasion it can be more convenient to just smash through a barbed wire obstacle instead of making your way around it. And the good news is that this ability is reserved for the melee weapon class that is already my favorite, the large-edged weapons. All of them, apart from the shovel, have this ability, and if you fancy the added bonus of being able to smash wood, for whatever reason, the hatchet or billhook should be your primary choice. I think all of the arguments I've made so far really help us understand why the large-edged weapons are the most picked class of melee weapons in Battlefield 1, but does being used the most also translate into getting the most kills? It's time for the all-important acid test, calculating the efficiency ratio by dividing the kill percentage share with the time percentage share for each class. A ratio smaller than 1 indicates that the weapon class gets less kills per time unit relative to the other classes, and of course, larger than 1 means more good. The results are in for the data snapshot I took on the 1st of September 2017, and the knives are on average the least efficient with a ratio of 0.91, followed by the clubs at 0.95, and at the top in terms of their effectiveness are the edged weapons. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is finally it. Who would have thought that I could babble on for this long about the melee weapons in Battlefield 1? But I do hope that some of this info was new and useful to you, and maybe even mildly interesting. With the new and exciting changes to Battlefield 1 going on right now, there is loads more work for me to do. Plenty of new weapons to explore, and I hear that sweeping changes to the damage models for most weapons are on the horizon. Plenty of work for me means loads of Battlefield 1 videos still to come, and if you're not subscribed yet, now is as good a time to do it as any. And with that, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.